Welcome to Seeking Numina. I'm your host, Elyse Welles, and I invite you to connect with the sacred wild within and around you through Numina, or sacred sites around the world, and the wisdom they hold. Together, let's remember the old ways, build relationships with land spirits, and dare to reach out to the fairies. The sacred wild is inviting you to dance in the moonlight. Will you answer their call? Welcome to Seeking Numina. I'm your host, Elyse Welles, and today we're going to be talking about when you find Numina, sacred places of spiritual power, how to actually use that land in your rituals. Working with land is something very close to my heart. Obviously, if you've been listening to the podcast, you've learned that about me. If you're totally new here, welcome. Seeking Numina is all about seeking sacred places and the way that they can bring out the truth of ourselves, and the way that we can, when we allow a land to enter us and to experience life with us, it's incredible how much more grounded, stable, and presence is a huge one for me that you will feel when you work with the land intentionally. But people often feel a bit remiss in that. Maybe you have a plan to visit a sacred place that's really calling to you. Maybe your family's from Ireland and you've always wanted to do a journey to Ireland to experience the sacred wells there. Maybe you've always wanted to go to the pyramids and see Egypt. Maybe you really want to come to Greece and meet the Oracle of Delphi, which you can do at my retreat in April 27th to May 2nd. We still have spots available for you to join me. But what do you do once you're there? And maybe it's the other way around. Maybe you found yourself on a hike or visiting a certain place and you felt the power of the land. Something nudged you and called you and made you feel, okay, this is a sacred place. Because not all sacred places are known or written down or even marked in books or websites. Most of the most sacred places actually aren't found in any of those places. And so when you come upon one, what do you do? How do you actually invite that land to join you in ritual? And that's what we're going to talk about today, how to work with the land in ritual. So the first thing that comes to mind, and the easiest thing you can do, is to do a ritual. If you already have a spiritual practice and you're on land and you know how to start your circle, you know what you like your rituals to begin like, you know the vibe that you're going for. You maybe even have, if you call the quarters in your practice, for example, if you call in the elements, doing that out in the land is incredibly, incredibly helpful. And actually, that's the first thing I'm going to teach you today. This is going to be a bit of a different podcast because I'm going to actually guide you through a practice here. So and this comes to us from witchcraft, but what's important to know about anything that's in modern witchcraft is it's going to have roots somewhere going back deeper and deeper and deeper into history. And calling on the elements is something we've seen. It's something that comes to us actually from alchemy and medieval texts in its form that we use it today. But going back even further, elementals were seen in ancient Greece as literal, essentially like fairies, literal beings. And if you want to listen to episode 3, you'll hear about fairies and are they really dangerous or not. I go all the way into detail about that in episode 3. So this is ancient precedent. So even if you don't identify as a witch, there's no reason to shy away from this if it calls to you as I explore it. And this is also something I explore in detail in Sacred Wild, an invitation to connect with spirits of the land, which is my debut book coming out with Llewellyn in 2025. So stay tuned for that. And you can sign up for my newsletter to get the info as that comes to fruition. Okay, so in witchcraft, we begin in the East. Other practices begin actually, this is East for me. This is North. We start in the East and we identify East as the direction of air, the direction of new beginnings, travel, communication, wisdom. And we call on air in the east. Then we turn to the south, which for me is actually, oh no, this is south. So I turn to the south. I call in fire in the south, and that's the direction of passion, desire, creativity, all the things that fire, inspiration, motivation, fire pulls us in as an element there. And then in the west, we call in the water, and that's bringing in, I always intentionally call in fresh water and seawater. If you're living closer to one or the other, maybe you just focus on one or the other. And then we end in north, which is the the element of earth. And she is our mother. She's connected to the creatures around us and also the animals. The animals and also the I want to say creatures. They're not creatures. The plants, the trees, the other spirits that call to us. And it's funny because the longer you do this work, the less that barrier exists, because the spirit of a tree and the spirit of a squirrel start to pop out to you just as strongly as each other in a landscape. When you first begin, the animals or the emissaries, I have lots of different terms I use for demarcating these different spirits you encounter when you work with the land that you'll read in my book when it comes out. So emissaries is one of those terms, and that's what I call the creatures of land, and that's who I call in on north when I call to the earth. So I'll actually do a quarter call for you. I'm going to stay seated for logistics for the camera here. But we start in the east. And this is how I call them in. Guardians of the east, element of air, creatures of wing and sky, Audier, sylphs, and all in the realm of fairy. I call forth your lessons of new beginnings to guide me and ground me in this ritual of connection to the land. Hail and welcome. And actually, you'll see I'm doing something here with my palms. This is something I teach my students in my courses, but palms are an energy center. This is where we can hold space from. We have our heart space, we have our chakras, our kundalini connecting all of those energy points, but we also have these palms right here. And this is something that magic teaches us. The more we raise energy, the more this becomes a part of our lives, where we can direct energy, guide it, hold it with our palms. So it sort of becomes intuitive, but that's where it begins. Oh, I don't know how to turn to south here, but guardians of the south, element of fire, creatures of heat and poison, direction of passion, creativity, and desire. Hesperides, and the cauldrons of creation. Join me in inspiring me today in this ritual of connection with land. Hail and welcome. Guardians of the West, element of water, creatures of seas, oceans, lakes, and ponds. Undines, Nereides, Naiades. Thank you for your gifts of flow. Thank you for the presence of emotion in my life that guides me in my relationships. I ask your presence and blessings today as I commune with the land here in this place. Hail and welcome. And sometimes they really hit you like that, we sometimes feel like we're going through the motions when we're calling in an element or speaking to a deity, but then there's those moments where they really let you know that they're with you. And I just had one of them. And last but not least, guardians of the north, mother, element of earth, Iyi, Gaia, Dryads. Creatures of wood and field. I call on you for stability and grounding as today I commune with the land in this place. Hail and welcome. Oh, wow. It's funny when you start something just for the sake of going through, like this literally was me teaching you how to do it, but it worked, and I felt all the elements join me. And so it doesn't have to be that long either. You can just say, welcome east, direction of new beginnings, welcome. Or you can just say, air, I call on you. Fire, I call on you. Water, I call on you. But really intentionally bringing your awareness to each element. And it serves two things. One, it calls in the elements in that space. Two, it brings your awareness to the presence of those elements in that space. And you might be saying, well, there's no water near this place. Maybe you're in a desert connecting. It doesn't matter. Water is in the air around us. It's in our bodies. It's literally in our eyes. It's how we're able to see, is with moisture in our eyes. So water is always, always with us. And even in a place that doesn't have water, it still needs water. You know, even deserts, they just store their water differently, the plants there. So it's just a different relationship to water. Doesn't mean there's no water. So there's really a lot of customization you can make for the environment that you're in. And I find that that's what I get called to do. And a lot of times I do that silently. Like if I'm on a trail or I'm in a place that's crowded and I still want to connect, that's where these guys come in. That's where the palms come in. And if you're listening to this instead of watching it, you might want to check out the YouTube version, especially if you want to go back anyway and write down some of what I said, maybe use it in your rituals. You'll see me using my palms to direct and raise energy in the video. Also, if you're on my Patreon, patreon.com/Elyse Welles, if you search ritual, just search that. There's over 300 different resources in that library, but you'll see lots of rituals and you'll see how I write in the quarter calls there. So you can actually just print those. All the rituals are printable for your books of shadows or your magical journals on Patreon as well. So that's the first thing. That's the first thing I do when I want to connect to land. The second thing I do is I leave an offering. And quite often the offering, and anytime we're in land, actually, we should really have that mindset of leave no trace, right? We don't want to hurt the environment by being there. And so many things can unintentionally hurt the environment. Leaving the trail distinctly. I mean, obviously every so often we have to step to the side or whatever, but literally leaving the trail and going off into the not marked zones, there might be a reason that that's not marked and that the native creatures of that area need that space. So that's part of leaving no trace as well, is staying where we know it's safe for the animals and the environment for us to stay. So keeping that in mind, my offering tends to be some water from my water bottle. I'll pour it out and give that to the land. I also will offer a piece of my hair. And I've seen actually people online saying that leaving hair is bad for the environment because birds can get it caught in their legs. And I can see that being true if it's something, I mean, birds deal with a lot worse than a single strand of my hair. You know what I mean? So I'll be honest, I don't put a lot of stock in that. I guess if you wanted to leave massive amounts of hair, maybe you wouldn't want to. But leaving one strand to fly in the wind, I mean, that happens all the time where we just lose a hair somewhere. So this intentional gifting of the hair is powerful. It's very powerful. It connects us to the space that we are in. Yeah, I'm sorry, I don't want to harp on my book too much, but I do have a really cool ritual in there that I can't wait for people to get about creating bonds between places with our hair. Like hair is, look at it, it's so long. Hair is such a big part of my spiritual path. It's a massive part of my spiritual practice. So that's what I'll leave. And if you know there's something that land needs, maybe they take donations for bird feeders at that preserve, or maybe you could donate a salt lick for the deer. There's things you could heighten your offering with as well. But in the moment, if you just realize, crap, wow, I really need to connect to this place. If you've got water, if you've got hair, you're good. You've got some offerings to make. So that's how I connect once I'm there. And then I usually meditate. if I have the luxury of time and freedom, some places, like if you go to Delphi, for example, you have to know the right places that you can meditate. Because actually, this is a bit of a side conversation, but in Greece, because witchcraft is illegal and because anything that's not Greek Orthodoxy is oppressed there, um, they're watching for people meditating and they won't allow you to at the main site. So you have to know where you can go in Delphi to meditate, which is why like traveling, going on a retreat with somebody like me who spends time building relationships with those land spirits anyway, like it's something I do regularly. I know the places to go and the land knows where to meet me there. And that is a massive benefit. So anyway, so when you're connecting to land, meditation is a really, really strong way to do it. Another really strong way to connect with land is drumming. You'll see me on social media doing this a lot, but I take my drum out into the woods. Here in Pennsylvania, I'm lucky to have an altar in the woods on an old tree stump where I get to commune. And frame drumming is my drum connection that I like to make. Other people might work with, there's lots of drums. You could use a djembe, you could use bongos, even a steel drum. Think of your environment, think of what your land likes to hear, and that's the drum to go with. So that's how you can commune with land in the place, at the source. Now, what about connecting with land after you've left the place? How can you bring a bit of that with you? Now, we've talked about leave no trace. And we often won't want to, have to bring things from afar into an environment it's not familiar with. Like, we want to be respectful of that. But when we're on a trail, there are certain things that, and again, this is where your morals and your comfort level comes in. But for me, if I'm on a trail and I'm having a beautiful connection with a certain tree and a leaf falls on my head, that leaf was for me to take home. And yes, it's bad to rake leaves. It's important to leave them on the ground. That is true. That's very true. But when I take a single leaf, and someone might say everybody could take a single leaf, that's probably not going to happen. And we're probably not going to find ourselves in a situation where every leaf is removed from the ground. If you are at a place that's in dire straits of environmental need, maybe, don't take the last leaves that are on that ground. It's like taking the last drips of water from a sacred spring. You wouldn't do that either. But when we visit sacred springs, like in Ireland, when I visited Bridget's Well, that's the point, is to actually collect that water, take it home, and recommune with the land. So it really is something. It really is something. It's really special to have a gift given to you by the land. And when it happens, you'll know. And don't feel bad about taking that one leaf or that one feather or that one rock. Like I remember this one meditation with Aphrodite. I was on a beach right as the waves were lapping up. And I meditated there for a little while. And when I came out of the meditation, she had given me a gift in the meditation. And I just had a feeling that it was going to be there in real life. And I'm on a beach, so there's a million things it could have been. And I knew, okay, it could be a shell, it could be a stone, it could be driftwood. And it ended up being a shell, but it was a pink shell. A pink shell. And to this day, this was in my first couple of months of being in Greece when I first moved there. To this day, I still have never found another pink shell. And so that felt super, super special for me. I knew that was from Aphrodite. So these invitations to connect begin as simply as calling to them, sitting with them, and deepening that connection through meditation or the giving of offerings. And they will give you something back. And so once you have that thing, once you have that gift, you can bring it home and you can do so many things with it. The land wants to be a bigger part of our lives. And when we bring it into the mundane or into the indoors, it opens up an opportunity for us to start breaking down that barrier between the outdoors and the indoors, the mundane and the magical. We get to have it all the time. And that's what land can bring for us. I've been working with this as I'm recording this. It's around the holiday season. And I've been working with that by bringing in, I'm usually in Greece where we don't have natural greens. This is actually a growing season in Greece. It's not a time of rest like it is in the West. And I really love that association with winter. So I've been intentionally bringing in greens a little bit here and there. I've also decorated the outside of our home here. And we had a tree fall actually in the beginning of December that took down a bunch of branches from a pine tree. So I was able to repurpose those fallen branches, those already destroyed branches, into some decor. I also took in some holly from our bush outside and some juniper. And so it's been really nice to bring in these natural greens and have them in the house. And our ancestors did that too. And I think it's important to remember that it was never just something fun to do. It's always had spiritual meaning. In Celtic cultures, the pine tree, because it stays evergreen, it never loses its needles or its leaves. It just stays green all year. That to them, to many Celtic cultures, I know Irish especially, they believed that stood for eternal life, that the pine tree represented eternal life. Similarly, our ancestors over in England, Germany, they would bring in the boughs of the evergreen to remind themselves of health. And it's interesting because in Greece, we have pevka, pine trees. We have a special protected pine tree that is where the Athena owls nest. And in the early spring, this is an older folk tradition, so it's dying out, of course, like most folk traditions, but my aunt still does this. She taught me how to do it. You collect the green pollen. It actually looks like yellowed powder all over the place. It's crazy how vibrant it is. And the pollen, you'll collect it and you can actually steep it with honey, mix it in with honey. If you can get local honey, even better. And then take it medicinally for allergies throughout the spring. So the pine is always providing health for us. Also, if you steep pine needles, double check, make sure they're edible. But white pine, for example, I know is edible. So you can take those fresh green needles, really fresh ones, and steep those in a tea as well. That's immune boosting. So pine is about longevity. So when we bring that inside, it brings that inside for us. Our ancestors knew that. And that doesn't extend, or that extends to many plants. It doesn't end with pine. So you can always be thinking, okay, well, if I bring in this acacia, how can I connect deeper to the goddess who it represents? How can I connect deeper to the lessons that it holds for me in springtime? Whatever the thing is that's calling you to bring it within, for me, I've actually been working with birch. There's a sacred site I recently discovered near my house here in PA. And each time I go, I experience trickster energy and I experience a deeper connection with the birch tree. And the birch tree is the first letter of the Om, the Irish alphabet, and the ancient Irish alphabet. And it also is the tree of new beginnings. It's basically air in a tree. It's intelligence, it's communication, it's new beginnings, it is travel. It's all the things we think of for air, or the planet Mercury, if you will, as well. And Birch and I have been on this journey. In fact, actually, I'll show you because I've kind of been consecrating it. I've been gifted this wand as well, which I've not been called to shape it up yet. We've just been connecting. I think there's a special way of shaping it that I'm going to be guided to do. But it's really special when this happens. And actually, right there is my wand with the feathers coming out of it, and the bone there is the wand I made during my initiation. So wands and I go way back. I also shared on this podcast, I believe, my wand that I made when I was like 5. And it's interesting because I've been called to wands in different ways. Like I've been wanting to work with the rhabdos, which is an ancient Greek wand that's about 4 feet long. And this one is almost there. It's about halfway there. So I feel like I'm like getting a training wand on my way to the bigger stuff. So yeah, sacred sites are going to commune with you. They're going to connect. They're going to ask you to bring them into their lives a little bit more. And I call this dialogue. So at the core of this episode, that's my biggest takeaway that I would want anyone listening to take with them. Look for signs of dialogue in the land. Keep a journal if you need to. Maybe do some voice notes. Maybe have a note on your phone that helps you remember. Do some videos. Make a photo album with the videos of the times that this happens. When you're outside, take notice of how the land wants to communicate with you. When you're at a sacred place, when you're in your own backyard, Do you see a white feather on the ground? That could be a sign of encouragement from the land spirits. If you see a gray feather, I've often interpreted that to mean that change is coming. The land has a deep wisdom that we don't always understand where it knows it from, but we do understand that it knows it. And when it gives us those nuggets of wisdom, it's the least we can do to notice them and receive them. And the more we notice them and receive them, it's just like our gift, our connection to our intuition. The more we deepen it by listening to it, the more it talks to us. And the land is the same way. Deity relationships are the same way. Friendships are the same way, right? The more we show up for each other, the more we respect each other, the more we love each other, the more we want to keep showing up for each other. It's the same way with the land. It's asking for you to join the dialogue. I promise it is. So that's definitely what I'd recommend. I call it keeping a land spirits journal. Literally it can just be a little one-liner every so often of, oh, I saw this today. There was a red cardinal right outside of the front door. I've never seen that before. I feel like I should write it down in there. And then the patterns will start to be clear and to start to emerge. And the last piece of advice I would give you is that favoring stones from your land, even if they're quote unquote boring stones like granite, basalt, limestone, oh my gosh, are those powerful, powerful, powerful stones. Powerful, powerful stones. Shout out to Nicholas Pearson. He's one of my favorite authors. He writes on crystals. He also wrote an amazing book on flower essences. He actually, in his latest book, Crystals for Psychic Self-Defense, he actually is coming on the Magic Kitchen January 19th, right after inauguration, to talk about that. Self-defense, anyway, that is. But what he does do that I really appreciate is he does include granite. He does talk about limestone. And this is a whole episode. Maybe I need to do an episode on limestone. Limestone is my favorite stone in the world. Like amethyst and limestone. Like that's where it's at. Amethyst, rose quartz, limestone. So powerful. I have several necklaces of limestone from sacred places I've visited. So never discredit the stone that's on your land. Never say to yourself, oh, this is just a mystery rock. Oh, this is gravel. Gravel is sacred. Gravel is from a mountain. Sometimes gravel is the most sacred thing we can find because it's actually created from mountain debris. It's from within the earth. So the land has so many gifts for us, even if on the surface we don't know to recognize them as gifts. And when we start opening the dialogue, they're going to start giving us things that we can bring with us and use in ritual. Thank you for seeking Numina with me today. I'm Elyse Welles. I hope you'll join me in 2 weeks for our next episode, and subscribe so that you can be notified when our episodes come out. Blessed be. Thank you for seeking Numina with me today. Join me at patreon.com/Elyse Welles to support this show and get access to a library of rituals, exclusive videos, meditations, and more. To learn more about my upcoming retreats, book a tarot reading, or learn with me in workshops, classes, or mentorship, visit seekingnumina.com.